Joining me now, your Republican colleague on House Intel, Congressman Rick Crawford, who, by the way, happens to be the chair. So, Congressman, let's talk through a lot of that. He said this information's been there, and people are asking questions. Why is this report from 2020, if Republicans had it all along, why is it just now surfacing? What do you make of the accusation that the timing is tied to Epstein?
Well, Republicans didn't have it all along. In fact, the 2017-2018 work product of the Hipsy majority staff was essentially secreted away in a CIA safe and has been for all this time with a couple of adjustments and addendums that were added in 2020. So I've been on this committee since 2017. In fact, that clip you played of Trey Gowdy questioning Brennan, I was sitting right next to him when he asked those questions. And so I know what this is about. We've been trying for 8 years to get our work product released back to Hipsy where it belongs, and we just got it. And that's thanks to President Trump's leadership saying this was important for the American people so that we can rebuild trust. And what we're trying to do, even with the resistance of some of the bureaucracy in the IC, we're trying to reinstill trust in the IC with the American people. And that's why this transparency is necessary.
So what about what Congressman Crow had to say? He said that the Steele dossier was not at the heart of this intel community assessment. And he said it wasn't what was relied on to get to that ultimate conclusion that Russia did meddle. And that is something that has bipartisan agreement.
It was 100% at the heart of the Russia collusion hoax. This was bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign. It was introduced as part of the evidence in the ICA that the IC came out with, that John Brennan, even to your point, you had that graphic up on the screen, he said it rings true. Even though he had some analysts that disagreed with him in including those documents, he said, but doesn't it ring true? If that's not a farce of an analysis, I don't know what is. So it's unfortunate that the director, who was himself an analyst, would have included something like that as foundational to the ICA, but in fact he did. And the other thing I would point out that he has a history of lying to Congress, and so it's reasonable to think that he would continue to lie to cover his tracks.
Well, we know that there's going to be a strike force that's come together from the DOJ. There's talk of a special counsel. Can you foresee Mr. Brennan being back before Congress, and do you expect he would answer questions under oath about this?
Well, I would hope so. And it's interesting that AG Bondi has chosen a strike force, because that's usually something you see in organized crime cases, mob takedowns, things of this nature. So I think that says a lot about the level of commitment and the parallels in terms of organized crime with this particular issue. So I'm encouraged by having a strike force there. I'm hopeful that, in fact, that Brennan will be called in to testify and under oath, and we'll see if his story stays the same. I doubt that it will, but you just never know what story he's going to say from one day to the next.
So President Obama, there's been a response from a spokesperson for him. In part, it reads this. It says, these bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. And I do, again, think there's agreement on that there wasn't a manipulation of hacking into election machines, changing votes. But this broader question about whether there was more to this conversation, President Obama says digging this up now, at least a spokesperson from him, is bizarre and ridiculous.
Well, of course he would think so, because he was the one that essentially initiated it. But I think it's important that the American people understand, first, the history of Russian malign influence in American elections. This goes back to, the Soviet era. They've been involved in the United States, a malign influence in the United States elections for decades. So nothing new under the sun with regard to that. But the other interesting thing is that the whole Russia collusion hoax, which is exactly what it was, a fraud perpetrated on the American people at the expense of President Trump. That whole deal was done basically saying that President Trump was an active participant, was colluding with the Russians to manipulate the outcome of the election. Now they're saying, okay, well, there were no votes manipulated or changed or altered or whatever. They're trying to, on the fly, change their story, when the story was that they went forward and said President Trump was a Russian asset. That was their story. Ranking Member Schiff said multiple times in hearings that he had evidence that implicated President Trump as a Russian asset. Never produced any of that evidence. It's not cited in this report. And now they're trying to memory hole this whole thing. I think this is typical of the Obama administration. He's the guy that authorized it. His henchmen, Brennan, Comey, and Clapper implemented, and they didn't have enough analysts in that group of folks that had the intestinal fortitude to push back and say, no, we don't want any part of it. And this is what we got. And it took us 8 years to bring these documents to light.
So with that in mind, knowing it took all that time to get these documents out, Congressman Crow says this information has been there. Maybe not to public access. We didn't know about it, but this information has been there. There's been access to it from other people in the intel community. And again, the same conclusions were reached about Russia and about its meddling and about its getting involved. So why is it different now? Because when you use words like we've heard from some connected to this release, treasonous, conspiracy, I mean, that's a big word to use. Even our own Andy McCarthy, who's no cheerleader for the Obama administration, says if there were a criminal offense that fit, Gabbard and Trump would cite it rather than chanting treason. The heinous crime of levying war against the United States or giving aid and comfort to America's wartime enemies, which clearly does not apply to this situation. Your response?
Yeah, so that information has been out there a long time. I doubt that the Democrats on our committee have taken the time to read it. We had access to it the whole time. They had the same opportunity to go over to the secure space at the CIA, review the same documents, and conduct their own investigation and their own report on that ICA, and they chose not to. Our team chose to, and that is the report that you saw released earlier this week. With regard to the claims of treason, I'll leave that to the courts to make that determination. My job as chairman of the committee was to bring this to light. We went through the appropriate process to get that done with the support of President Trump, with the support of his IC team, and now it's out there for the American people to see just exactly what happened and why that ICA is so grossly flawed. Well,
I encourage people to go read it just as well as they can go read the bipartisan Senate reports from years ago. There's plenty of information. Dig into it for yourself. See what you think. Chairman Crawford, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.